Sometimes when people get mad, they get really opinionated and project on other people. But you did something that was offensive, and then what if you're in the same ethnic group? Well, you did something that offended the definition of how I say the ethnic group should be represented. And then, maybe you get within your family and you didn't piss the family off because you did something that might have made somebody else in the family look bad or better than the other person. I don't know, I've never been married. Can't really speak to that. I found this thing a while ago. It was this report, and this report was identifying pieces of legislation the United States had committed to that were domestic efforts to demonstrate compliance with international treaties, including treaties on nuclear, biological, chemical, and radiological weapons. And I was, in one manner, grateful to find it because, A, I found it right before the 25-year deadline. Right before it would have been 20 years old, that specific document. B, it showed something that had been happening recurrently that I had noticed as a trend but didn't have a way to actually tear to an actual definitive official source, which was a specific manner in which things having to do with chemicals that were derivatives or byproducts of the oil and gas and petroleum refining process ended up being connected to some form of chemical weapons charge or chemical weapons historical notation, and then somehow segued into or paired concurrently to something having to do with nuclear waste, nuclear energy, or more likely than not, nuclear weapons. And I couldn't figure out, well, on one level, they're talking about chemical weapons, but on another level, they're talking about nuclear weapons, right? And it was almost this thing of grading, this concept of like different ways of like there's different tiers. What I understood is kind of like an echelon process. There's multiple operations happening concurrently, and depending upon your level of clearance or your particular, what do they call it, class in terms of understanding of acidization, you might be doing one thing, but then on other bandwidths or other levels, somebody's doing something concurrent. And then at some point, somebody showed me how this is poured into a kind of matrix where there is almost a churning or a rotation. And at certain points, you can be providing a particular element of the process while other people are running other elements of the processes. And I understood this is how they coordinate remote operations. And certain people perform certain roles in the actual build-up, financing, execution, and then reporting on a covert op. And that also means that there are areas at which one can intervene in order to de-escalate it and or recalibrate the scenario and allow for the assets that are accruing in order to create the what I call terminal option that allows for the actual execution of a terrorist act to be recirculated after it's been recharacterized. And involves somebody that has consciousness of the process. It involves somebody that has access to appropriate other nodes that can allow for that de-escalation to be, instantaneously recharacterized and then reappropriated elsewhere. But if you intentionally screw the wrong people, and if you intentionally sabotage the wrong people, that can also accrue. And that's exactly what they did to me. I've been conscious of this for 5 years. From a very specific time frame in my life, they started setting up scenarios based upon intentional misrepresentations of things I had done in the past. And those were allowed to accrue. And they were connected to processes that had benchmarks. And when those benchmarks weren't met, the other things about my life that had been mischaracterized were allowed to accrue. And that accrual created a form of liability that could be leveraged in addition to other things to actually executing or effectuating a terrorist attack. At some point, it became enough of a liability available for leveraging in acts of political assassination of opposition political figures in other parts of the world. And for instance, Salah. There were 3 Salahs that were assassinated within very strategic, specifically coordinated events that had benchmarks that were connected to anniversaries associated with articles I had written that tiered to an article I had co-written with an Army veteran that I now no longer can get. They won't even acknowledge that article exists. It's not online, and the publication won't respond. And yet it has been used, and there are dates and times on the connection with that article and other articles I wrote with the same publication. And as those dates have come up, it has allowed for a terminal hedge to be executed that actually effectuates a possibility for political assassination. I know this. I know this. Now, if you say, well, you weren't supposed to know, then who was? Who was supposed to know that you intentionally set their life up to mischaracterize them and things they did and were capable of doing so that it could be created as lines of financing on some form of dark market that actually could effectuate a political assassination of somebody determined to be an opposition political figure of somebody in another country? Those guys, so far as I know, never even came to the United States. It's not like they came here, hooked up some deals, went back home, and then all of a sudden they were enemy number one. And there was a specific name reference that's just one example. And every fucking time it happened, I had to live through the fact of understanding the specific weaponization that effectuated their assassination had to do with targeting my fucking heart. My actual fucking heart, which was connected to some sort of technology, I believe a patent, that if I don't have the specific patent, I have patents later in the legacy for the same company, that were connected to some company that thought it was entitled to fuck with me and purchase things about my life that were never intended to be used as weapons of war, and then fuck with me with the hope, what, that at 40 years old I would just give up and agree to be a suburban housewife for whoever they said I was okay to be squirreled away with. And literally that's what they did. I mean, it gets back to this thing, because the thing is, my grandpa was the kind of guy who could have covered that security. Literally. Him specifically, literally. They murdered him 2 years before he could have done that. You understand? He could have covered that, and they strategically, intentionally murdered him and trafficked me and tried to get me to agree to engage in acts of prostitution after they weaponized me. Now, that's just one example. As a matter of fact, I bring it up because today I found another. They've done it again. They did it again this time last year. That's what I saw. Even if the records haven't been backdated and haven't been changed ex post facto, which they may well have. You know how they are with their creative electronic engineering. But these other ones, they haven't even been published yet. They're said to be published tomorrow. So even if they do change them, as of right now, it tears to that same scheme. They've done it again. They've done it again where they've increased the risk leveraging associated with the liability that's been allowed to accrue by intentional mischaracterization of certain people. Now, you can say, well, we don't think you're actually at the quality or the capability where you could have been able to participate in a comprehensive financial systematology that would have been actually responsibly engaged in uranium trade or monitoring facilities that might have actually had to make use of uranium. We don't actually think you have the capability to do something akin to participate in an apprenticeship role where you could have responsibly learned how to use techniques or standards associated with the security and safety of an actual nuclear facility. We don't actually think you have the temperament to be able to do an on-site inspection of a facility that manufactures chemical weapons and or trains other people in either how to use chemical weapons or how to appropriately dispose of chemical weapons. We don't think you're that smart. We don't think you're that good. You can also say, we don't think you're actually of the caliber where you could write a criminal indictment and that you could back it up with an argument using appropriate case law citations and drawing on established precedents, and or maybe attempting to make a argument specific to that one that might be involved with establishing a new precedent. You're just not that fucking smart. You can say that. But one thing that is irrefutable is that I catch these patterns. And I never agreed to be in a pari-mutuel betting pool. I never agreed to sports gambling. I find it unseemly. You know, when I play poker with people, I don't even like to bet. I don't agree with gambling. Who else thought that they were entitled to take my entire fucking life? And anything, you have to be able, you have to agree that if nothing else, I'm capable of picking up this piece of information here, that piece of information there, analyzing a trend, maybe coming up with a prognostication, checking in with different sources to see if that prognostication got met. I mean, you can't deny that I can at least do that, because I've been doing it consistently for 4 years while I've been completely fucking ignored by anybody that claims that they are in a position of authority enough to command the kind of economy that they are so insistent on ramming down the rest of our throats. You can't deny that. So what do you do with a bitch like me? Because I'm not dying. You don't have the right to take me out. Only God does. And God, for whatever reason, doesn't want me dead yet. And every fucking day, you guys end up getting caught in such a horrendous way. And that accrual builds and builds and builds. And I think somewhere the word has gotten out that you guys just put the wrong people in the wrong places, and they've been there for too fucking long. What are you going to do? They just did it again. They just did it again. And the ironic thing is now all those people we spent the last 10 years talking shit about when it came to their radiological, chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons disposal. We justified shutting off their entire fucking economy. We justified stealing from them the good stuff they had, circulating it all over the place, depreciating the shit out of it, discounting the shit out of it, and then refusing to let them get it back legitimately. We won't let them meet with people we said it was okay to recirculate it to under a different pairing. And if you've got somebody that might potentially have been somebody that could have been representative or at least a little more resonant with what the original intention was, well, you got to find a way to defame her. I am sick and fucking tired of somebody thinking they have any right to chastise me for anything about anything Jewish anymore. We're back to fucking Albany in 1970 fucking 7. How many goddamn wives do I have right now, again, with Jewish fucking names? I'm fucking serious. That's what that little fucking Cornyn Schumer handoff yesterday did. I'm back in fucking Albany in 1970 fucking 7. I love my fucking wife. Over and over and over again. You guys never wanted to be responsible with what it meant to let people with a certain kind of ethnic or particular historical experience literally stamp their fucking name and their family name all over my life and all over my family and expect me to be allowed to be run all over the fucking place for how long? I'm not going to let you baptize me again and tell me to shut the fuck up. And that's exactly what it seems like ended up actually happening. You guys let me get cut off from what I knew. You came up with some stupid bullshit story to chastise me so you could sell my life to somebody else. And this whole scheme is so fucking terribly racist and anti-Semitic. And nobody wants to admit it. And it keeps getting projected. I spent 10 years living in terror because somebody told me I lied about being a Jew. I didn't. Because as long as every fucking day my life is allowed to be parsed out and redistributed to other people, you know what that tells me? I do belong to Jews. You set it up so my entire fucking life was going to use me like I was some little fucking cute Christian slave girl for a bunch of people with Jewish fucking last names. Are you guys financing Hillary Clinton's campaign with my pretty little charity ass? Because that's what it sounds like now. You literally let a bunch of people that thought that they were entitled to come from a particular way of being, put their name as first claim on my life and my family's life. And then you guys would circulate it and you'd share it and you'd do what you want, including let me maybe hang out with your kids for a while. Maybe let me put my name on an article about some very important asset in your community. And after a certain amount of time, I was just supposed to be moved on. You didn't want me. But the problem is you got me. And unfortunately, whatever else you thought you were doing, we're back to Albany in 1977. I love my wife. I can see the page right now in my mind. It's burned in my fucking brain. I can see it. I love my wife right there. You wanted me in theater? You wanted to sell my life for inner fucking tainment. I love my wife. Him and his family, him and his family, him and his family. I think there were like 2 right underneath. Then there were a column on each side, all the way down the fucking page. Over and over and over and over again. So, you know, what am I supposed to do? You guys wouldn't admit it. To this day, you wouldn't admit it. Now, I haven't gotten the books from the other guy, right? Which I wanted to get to begin with. But when I went to the library, that library belonged to somebody else. You guys made my entire life about me being a guest in my own country. Because for some reason, I was supposed to be allowed to be used for you since I was fucking born. My family didn't owe you guys anything. My father had no debt. My mother had no debt. What was it that made you guys think it was okay to take somebody when they were a baby and put a goddamn fucking bond certificate number on their fucking life and spend 43 fucking years fucking around with them? I don't want to read your fucking book. I want to know why when I called your fucking office and I said that I had found what I had found and I had what I had had, your little secretary or receptionist said they'd take my information and they'd take my email and they'd get back to me, and they never did. I called them to say I had information about how somebody was trying to set up homeless women to think that you had offered them your identity so that they could engage in illegal activity. That was going on 3 years ago. Were you one of those bondholders? Did you have a bond certificate from that Albany issue in 1977? You personally, Steven Schwartzman. Did you re-up? Did you invest with whoever invested with the class of 1999 at the University of Chicago? Why am I on a current where they're constantly dinging you personally, and now for the last 2 months have been trying to ding at least 2 people who also have very Jewish sounding names and a very esteemed Jewish family background from when I went to college, with deals connected to rationales associated with when we were in college together? They haven't talked to me for years. I haven't been a part of their community for 20 years. Why am I supposed to be financing all kinds of deals for other people, dealing with this excoriation for my misrepresentation of the authenticity of my pedigree? And again now, back in 1995, recapitulating all the fucking deals that were hustled on us without anybody telling us about it. Why am I back in Albany in 1977?